I think I mentioned to most of you, some of you might not have been here, Carolyn's in Alabama. We have a granddaughter down there that was having her birthday. I was trying to remember, I think she's 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And Carolyn went down to have a birthday party with her and spend some time. And then this grandson of ours, Mackay, he's visiting with us from Alabama. Now, he's going to be with us for about a week, so he got to come with me today. We're glad of that. Be opening your Bibles to Acts chapter 27. We're continuing our study of the book of Acts, and we're about to finish the book of Acts. And I have suggested this to 2 or 3 people, and they seem to have an interest in it, so I'll suggest it in front of all of you, and then you can let me know what you think about it after services or whatever. I'm thinking about, after we finish the book of Acts, of doing an Old Testament study and starting with the book of Genesis. It's such a very, very important book. It's the first book of the Bible for a reason. And, it's like other books, math book, if you don't get chapter 1 down, you're not going to be able to handle chapter 22. So you really need to study and get the background for the whole Bible, really, is found in the book of Genesis. So that's all right, that's what we'll do. And I told Carolyn, we look at all those chapters, the number of chapters, and if we take a week or 2 to do a chapter, I said, maybe I'll live long enough to finish it. Maybe that's a goal to have. Lord, let me live long enough. James Rogers preaches at Smyrna, and he started a series in the Old Testament, and he's been 15 years in the Old Testament. He's not got through with 3 or 4 books. I think he spent about 10 or 12 years in the book of Genesis. So we won't do that. But I'm not coming every Sunday, so it will take a while. If you think about maybe 1 Sunday a month or 2 Sundays a month, it'll take several studies to finish. But here in Acts 27, Paul is going to Rome to be judged by Caesar. And you remember why? He's the one that made that appeal. He's a Roman citizen, and he has that right. And he says, I appeal to Caesar. He wasn't going to be judged by these high priests and Jews that hated him because he was preaching Christianity, and they wanted to kill him, but just because he was a Christian. And that's not reason enough to kill somebody, even under the law back then. It wasn't. So the Bible says it was determined that we should sail into Italy. Well, Festus determined it. When he made that appeal, you've appealed to Caesar, then Caesar shall you go. Interesting too, when you read the book of the book of Acts, which is written by Luke, in the first part, it says they went over and then they got on the ship and they did this and they did that. But there's a point in the book that it's like this. Notice, it was determined that we should sail. We. And then entering into the ship, we launched. So Luke is with Paul now. He's traveling with him. And you'll see that through several chapters here that it's we. He's with them. Paul was not the only prisoner. It was determined that we would go, and they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners. A lot of times I think we've read that and we've just thought Paul on his voyage to Rome and Paul's the only prisoner on the ship, but it's not. I don't know how many of them there were. It's a big ship. We're going to find that out when we find out how many people are on that ship. And that doesn't tell us maybe as much as we'd like to know, but in all probability, these folks that are on this ship are Roman citizens as well. Because if they hadn't been, they'd have been judged by Herod. Or Festus or some of the others. But the Roman citizens could say, I appeal to Caesar, and they got to go. And they got a fair trial in Rome, where they might not get a fair trial under Herod or some of these other puppets that were bought their way into their position that they were serving. And he gets into this ship, and they launch. Now, they're down around, not in Jerusalem, but Tyre, Sidon, up at that particular area. And they're going to go out, of course, on the map, when you look at that, Italy is west, and Rome, of course, is in Italy there. They've got to go west. They've got to go by the Isle of Cyprus and the Isle of Crete out in the Mediterranean. and head on that way to make it on this particular trip. They find this ship, and there's a certain man by the name of Julius. He is a centurion. Julius was given the charge to take care of Paul and take him on this trip. And a centurion was the captain of 100 men. And we're not told if all 100 of them were on this ship or not. But we are told later on that there's a few hundred on the ship. So he could have had all of his soldiers on the ship with him. We don't know that. And I don't know how many prisoners. If there were several prisoners, they may have taken all of them. And I don't know how many other passengers are on the ship either. These are ships, as we're going to learn, they're going to take one to a certain point, then they trade ships and take another ship. These are not Roman Empire ships. These are just evidently ships that you pay your fare and get on the ship and go. So I don't know who all was on the ship and what kind of passengers, but Paul is going to have a great impact on this centurion, Julius, and on the men that are on this ship. They're beginning this trip around Caesarea on the coast, and take this ship and they're going to go out. It says that they sail. The next day we touched at Sidon. If you look on your map, the cities of Tyre and Sidon, or Zidon, sometimes it's spelled different ways, were seaport cities there, which would be several miles north of Jerusalem. But that's the area that they're going in and going out. And they stopped there, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends and to refresh himself. So they dock, an anchor, and Paul is given the opportunity to get off the ship and go be with some of his friends and get something to eat, get some rest, and whatnot. And remember, Paul has not been convicted of any crime. And I'm sure Julius, as well as others, knew that the charges were going to be religious charges. In other words, he's teaching something they don't like. So they're going to put him in prison for that. And that's not really a crime. And he's going to be treated with respect and dignity because of that. If he was a murderer or something that he had done against Rome, he wouldn't have been treated with that kind of kindness. But they know this is just all. The Jews are always arguing. Some believe in the resurrection, some don't. And this one wants to be in charge. You Sadducees, Pharisees, Essenes, Herodians. You got all these different little sects that are arguing all the time. And he's not really that concerned about it. He knows evidently the character of Paul. He has a lot of respect for Paul. We're going to see as we move on through this particular story. And it says that they launched from thence and they sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. They go under it or south of it. And the idea is to sail as close to the land as you can without being in any danger of hitting rocks or whatnot. And that way, at least one area, you've got the wind blocked. You ever be outside when it's real, real cold and windy, and you'd rather be on this side of the house because there's no wind. You get over here, the wind just cuts you in two. But you get over here, there is none. So that's sort of what they're doing. There's the Isle of Cyprus, and they're going to go south of the island, and they're going to try to stay up close enough that those winds that's coming down, some of the winds, will not hit them and cause problems. And we're introduced there in the second verse to Aristarchus, one of Paul's traveling companions. He's also mentioned in Acts 19 and verse 29, and he's mentioned in Acts 20, verse 4, and Colossians 4, verse 10, and also in Philemon, verse 24. He's mentioned 3 or 4 different places. And he is a co-prisoner. He's referred to as a co-prisoner with Paul. And when you read through the New Testament, if Paul was your good friend, you run a pretty good chance of being a prisoner. if you ran around with Paul and stayed with him, and that's a good thing, but there's a lot of the folks that's going to be prisoners because, excuse me, of their association with Paul. And they sail under Cyprus. Well, there's a fellow in the New Testament that's a very famous fellow that was from Cyprus. Anybody remember who that fellow was in the book of Acts? He traveled with Paul a lot. Not Paul and Silas, but Paul and Barnabas. Yeah, he was from Cyprus. That's his home area. So they're sailing through that particular area. They sailed over to Cilicia and Pamphylia. They came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And you can look all these cities up on the map and see where all they're traveling as they're making their way, as I said, from Caesarea to Cyprus and all in that area, trying to head over and get to Rome. The centurion found a ship, so they're going to trade ships now. They find a ship of Alexandria. Alexandria was the capital city in Egypt. The great Alexandrian library was there. One of the biggest and best libraries in the world was in Alexandria. So they find a ship that was sailing to Italy. All right? That one's going to Rome. You take this ship, things hadn't changed a whole lot. You take this airplane and you go to here, then you get off and you get on another connecting flight and you go over there, and then you get another and go over there. They're not doing it with airplanes, they're doing it with ships. This was Paul's connecting flight. He goes over to this place, he gets off, he gets on another ship, and this one's going to Italy. So that's the one you want to be on.
When our son was in the Navy, he was getting deployed over to Gulf War. But he couldn't tell us where he was at.
Yeah.
And he said, well, just look at Paul's missionary journey, his first one, and around the island while he was in Cyprus.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of history with those places, and still a lot of things going on in the world around those particular places. So they change ships, find this ship going to Italy, and verse 9 says, much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them and said to them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with much hurt and much damage, not only of the lading of the ship, but also of our lives. Well, a couple of things there, going back. He talks about the fast is already gone. This evidently has reference to the Day of Atonement with the Jews, referring to that particular fast. And this would make it in October, or what we would refer to as October. And from what I'm told, during that particular time, that's not the best time to be sailing in that area. We would have similar things maybe here in the United States. Think about the Great Lakes up there. There's certain times of the year it's more dangerous to be out in the Great Lake Michigan, some of those places, than it would be other times of the year. And the people that know that, when they're out fishing and sailing, they stay a little closer to the shore. You don't want to be out in the middle of something like that when a big storm hits. So he's trying to get them to stay. Let's wait. This is not the time of year that we ought to sail. Let's just winter here. And then when spring rolls around, it'll be much safer and we'll go on. But no, they're not going to listen to Paul. And he tried to tell them what was going on. The centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. Well, that's sort of obvious would be, wouldn't it? Who's the expert here? You, Paul? How many ships have you sailed, Paul? Yeah, this guy's the captain of the ship. He's done this many times. He says we ought to go on. We're going to listen to him. Because the haven was not commodious to winter in, and the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenicia, and there to winter, which is a haven in Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. So they said, well, this is not the best place to stay in the wintertime in this particular harbor. So let's see if we can make it over to that one. And Paul, of course, tried to get them not to do that. But not long after, there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euclidon. And this is somewhat like a typhoon or a hurricane. And you don't want to be out on the sea in something like that. I remember going out one time on a fishing boat in Florida. And we went out about 10 miles into the ocean. And I was trying to fish, and I couldn't fish because I couldn't stand up. I was being thrown right to left, trying to fish with one hand. I couldn't. And I commented about how rough the water was, and I was told, oh, this is a calm day. This is not a rough day. You ought to be out here when it's rough. And I said, no, thank you. I don't want to be out there when it's rough. I didn't want to be out there when it was calm. I was smart. I took some Dramamine before we went, and everybody else was throwing up, and I wasn't. But it was rough. So you imagine being out, and we think about something like that. And of course, only sailors could tell you stories about 30, 40-foot waves going up and crashing down. And you go down in a hole you can't even see, and you come up and ride the top of it. Just unbelievable what can happen in a storm like that. So here's this typhoon, this hurricane that Paul is going to have to endure, and the other fellows are too. It helps us when we see this, and you read how many days they went without seeing neither sun nor stars. It was terrible, terrible storm. And we can sort of relate to it a little better and understand what Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning with verse 24. As we think about this chapter and what they endured, look at what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 11, verse 24, beginning. Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. Thrice was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. This is probably one of those times that we're about to read about. If it wasn't, it said 4 times. So this is one of the 3 times that he suffered shipwreck. A night and a day have I been in the deep. I can't imagine that. Being in the ocean, not knowing if a shark's going to take your bottom half off or not, and you're in water and maybe the waves are going up 20, 30 feet, and you're in the dark and can't see, and how horrible that would be. He said, a night and a day I've been in the deep. And then he goes on to talk about the other perils and journeys, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, and all of those things that he mentions there. That gives us a little bit of insight as we're reading this. This is some of the things that Paul suffered and endured for the cause of Christ. The ship was caught in this storm. It couldn't bear up in the wind, and they decided to let her drive. They let the sails down. The ship would have been ruined had they left the sails up, maybe even turned over with the wind catching the sails like that. So you just let it loose. It goes wherever it's going to go. And they're running under a certain island, which is called Claudia. We had much work to come to the boat, so they want to try to repair the boat. They taken it up, or they did what they could probably to get part of it out of the water so they could get under it and start trying to patch some of the holes. This is not a metal aircraft carrier or a destroyer. This is a wooden boat. And they're going to have to try to do some repairing on it. They're trying to help the undergirding of the ship, but they were fearful of quicksand. There was some quicksand there. They were afraid they were going to get in it, so they had to hurry up and get out of that particular situation. Being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our hands the tackling of the ship. The tackling would be the furniture or the gear that's on the ship. Maybe pulleys, maybe ropes, I don't know what all. But they're going to try to throw everything overboard and make it as light as possible. And it says in verse 20, when neither sun nor stars, now think about this, you can't see the sun and you can't see the stars for many days. And the way it's worded in the King James Version, it says, and no small tempest lay on us. Well, what's the opposite of no small? A very large. He's no small man. That means he's a very large man. So no small tempest, which means a very large tempest. It was a very severe, heavy storm that lay on us. Now, what's the wording in verse 20? All hope that we should be saved was taken away. Well, that'd be a bleak situation to be in, wouldn't it? Now, you're in a ship with sailors, a guy that owns the ship, that's very experienced at ships and been out in the sea with a lot of storms, and he says, we're not going to make it. We're all going to die. Well, you can pretty well take that to the bank. He's not just being panicky or anything. That's like the apostles when they're out on this ship, and they fished the Sea of Galilee all the time. And Peter and John, several of them, they were fishermen. They'd been out in that thing on many times with storms, and they said, Lord, save us, we're going to die, we're going to perish. That must have been a terrible, terrible storm, or they wouldn't have said that. If it just had been a normal storm, they said, we've seen worse, hang on, we'll be all right. No, we're all going to die. This is a terrible, terrible storm, and the worst storm that probably ever was. And Jesus said, peace, be still. And that fast, it's just level like the top of that table. You know that had an impact on fishermen to see that. It's never been done that way. I mean, they've had terrible storms, and they got better over a period of hours and hours and hours, and then the storm went away. But never just somebody rebuked the wind and said, peace, be still, and it happened. So they're in a situation when there's no hope. All hope is taken away. We're all going to die. And they recognize that. And after a long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, sirs, you should have hearkened to me. Paul said, I told you so. I told you. But you wouldn't listen to me. And you shouldn't have left Crete. And there was no harm and wouldn't have this loss. And now he said, I exhort you, be of good cheer. See, now notice how this turns. From verse 20, there's no hope. We're all going to die. Now Paul's going to give him hope. Paul says, an angel stood by me, an angel of God whom I serve, and said, fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given them all of them that sail with thee. You're not going to lose a one. It goes from we're all going to die to nobody's going to die. From the worst news to the best news that you can imagine. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God that it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. He says, we're going to be shipwrecked. He tells them, we're going to lose the ship. But none of us are going to die. Well, you can replace the ship, but you can't replace the lives of these men. So they're afraid of what's going to happen, what's going to take place, and things are looking bad for them. But Paul is trying to comfort them and calm them down. His message was one that we're all going to be okay. We're all going to be saved. But you're going to notice there's going to be conditions with salvation. Imagine that. Salvation has conditions. And we'll see that as we move on. So they fear lest falling upon the rocks, they cast their anchors out in the stern and wished for the day. So, and you read through, it's dark, it's terrible. I don't know if they could see anything at this particular time, but it talks about them, they sounded, and that's a naval term, letting down ropes to see how deep it is. They had ropes with knots tied on them, or some piece of metal or whatever tied on, and they could let the thing down over the side and pull it up and count the number of things and say, okay, it's so many meters deep. Well, if you're out in the middle of the ocean and you let the thing down, it won't touch the bottom. But if you're getting close to an island and you let the thing down and you say, well, it's 25 yards. The water's 25 yards deep, or 100 feet deep, or whatever. And then a few minutes later, it's 50 feet deep. Well, we're getting closer to something. But you wouldn't want to try to dock a ship at night in a storm with rocks around. And a lot of the areas had rocks. But you know, over the years, what happened in so many of these areas, especially well-traveled areas, they put up lighthouses. And here you are out in the sea, and there's a storm, and it's dark, and you're coming in, and you don't know, are we going to run into the rocks and all die? No, there's a lighthouse. And if you'll set your compass at such and such thing and follow that light, you can come right into the harbor and be safe. And we have some songs about Jesus being our lighthouse. Yeah, He is our lighthouse. There's security if we fix our eye on Him. So, you have verse 30, that some of the guys on the ship pretend, it says, that they were about to flee the ship under color, that is, under pretext or on a cloak of show. In other words, they said, well, we're going to get these lifeboats and we're going to go up to the front of the boat and check so-and-so. See, we're in the lifeboats and we're going. Save yourself. Look out for number one. Isn't that the way it works? You read stories about the Titanic. You know, they started out women and children first, but some of the rich men wanted to get in the boat too. I'm only concerned about me. So they're going to leave. They're going to take the lifeboats and leave. And Paul told them, he told the centurion, the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved. I told you an angel stood by and told me that we're all going to make it alive, but there's conditions. You've got to stay in the ship. Now, on that particular occasion, salvation was in that ship. Not near the ship, but in the ship. You had to abide in the ship. Well, where is salvation today? It's in Christ. Unless you are in Christ, you know, 2 Corinthians 5:7, any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. All spiritual blessings are in Christ, Ephesians 1:3. Galatians 3:26 and 27, for as many of us of you have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. 1 Corinthians 12:13, for by one Spirit are we all baptized into one body. Acts 2:47, on the day of Pentecost, those that obeyed the gospel, the Lord added to the church daily, such as should be saved. So today, salvation's in the church. It's in Christ. There's several. I've got a chart sermon that I preach. I used to preach a lot of the sheets charts. I've got one, where is salvation? And you go back to the days of Noah, salvation was in the ark. What happened if you were in your own little boat trying to float around? No, had to be in the ark. Then you come to the city, they're coming into Jericho, and you put the blood on the door, excuse me, not the blood, I'm thinking about the children of Israel. That was another one. The Exodus, you put the blood on the doorpost and lintel, and you have to be in the house to be saved. And then you had Rahab the harlot. She let the thing down, the cover, and when you come in, except you're in that house, you're going to be killed. And then here, except these abide in the ship, you can't be saved. And all through the Bible, there's different stories like that. You've got to be in something in order to be saved. And today, you've got to be in Christ in order to be saved. So Paul encourages them to take some meat, eat something. You've been days without eating anything, and if you thought you were going to die pretty soon, you wouldn't necessarily be that concerned about eating, would you? A lot of things that's really important are not important when you see that you're going to die. And that's a lesson for us all as well. You know, people don't think as they're dying, usually I wouldn't think that they think about how much money they've got in the bank or how their stocks are doing or whatever. You know, that's not what's on their mind at that particular time. So eat something. And there's another good reason for that. These men have gone days without eating. What's your physical condition if you've gone days without eating? Yeah, you're very weak. Are you ready to swim 200 or 300 yards and be tried physically and one of the most difficult things you've ever done in your life? I mean, people don't usually enter the Olympics, and I haven't had anything to eat in 14 days. I'm going to go out here and enter the Olympics. No. You're going to fall over flat on your face if you do that. So there's another reason there. Eat something. Get some strength in your body, because Paul knew what's going to happen. They broke bread. That's interesting too. He gave them food, and in the presence of all of them, he thanks God, and they begin to eat. So he is thanking God. An angel told me we're all going to live. Here's some food, eat it. And then he's praying to God. And be of good cheer. They took something, they ate. And it says, verse 37, that all in the ship, 216. That's a pretty big ship, isn't it? That's not a little lifeboat. That's a big, big ship. And in a storm, the bigger the ship, the better. It does a little bit better when it's bigger. So they're coming in. They go to a certain creek, and the ship is there. They take up their anchors. They commit themselves, and they're going to try to make a run, so to speak, and get in a little closer. Falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the fore part stuck fast, and the remaining unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. Well, you don't want to be on a ship that's broke. Water's going to come in it. So now we got to leave the ship. He told them, stay in the ship, and he got them closer and closer and closer to the shore. And now, what are we going to do? Well, remember the Philippian jailer, when the earthquake came and the prisoners may have escaped, he drew his sword. He's going to kill himself, because they're going to kill him in a very horrible way if his prisoners escaped. So this centurion has been given charge of these soldiers. Now this ship's going to run aground. What if one or two of them swims to shore and gets away? And they're going to be in trouble. So let's not all commit mass suicide. Let's just kill the prisoners. And that way, no prisoners escape. So they wanted to kill the prisoners. But the centurion, Julius, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. Those of you that can swim, I said, I don't know how far out they were, but in a bad storm, you don't want to swim very far in a bad storm. You'll be spitting up a lot of water. So those that can swim, go ahead. The rest of you, and you think about being in a ship that's going down and you can't even swim. That'd be a horrible thing, wouldn't it? The rest of them were to grab boards, broken pieces of the ship, anything that would float, and try to make it, hold on to that, and try to get to shore, that they may escape all safe to land. And they did, and they all made it. So that's just an interesting thing that happened. You stay on the ship, stay as long as you can, eat something before, and then those that can swim, jump in, head toward the shore. Those that can't, hold on to parts of the ship. The ship that's breaking up became their salvation. That's interesting, isn't it? The ship in its destruction was their salvation. You can't swim, hold on to a board, and you won't sink. That's your life jacket, your life vest. Kick your feet, do what you can, and let the waves bring you into shore, and you'll make it. And they did. That was very, very interesting how that happened. Now, once they get to shore, and that'll be our next lesson, there's going to be some interesting things that happen while they're there. Anybody have a comment, question, anything over chapter 27?
When they didn't get on the lifeboat, we were talking about young lifeboat, they didn't just leave the lifeboat there, they cut the rope and let the lifeboat go.
Evidently they did, yeah. And they probably knew that they would be safer holding on to a board than they would that little lifeboat that would have capped over anyway, as high as the waves were.
I didn't make much attention when I was in school. Who was the ship that came to the Americans and they crashed it? So we're here to stay.
I remember that, but I don't remember what the name of the ship was.
Yeah. Who it was.
Yeah.
In and around Virginia, I think.
Yeah, I think I remember reading about that, but I don't remember the name of the ship or who the folks were. Yeah.
See, if they would have been lifeboats, they wouldn't have, they'd had that temptation to either mute the ship or something, or would listen to Paul. Mm-hmm. They just took that temptation away.
Yeah.
You gotta remove it.
Yep.
You got to remove that.
Yep.
Just like becoming a Christian, you got to do something.
Yep.
And it's got to be positive. It's got to be what God said. Christ.
Yep.
And share.
And man always seems like he knows more than God. That, you know, these lifeboats would be the thing to be in. I want to be in the lifeboat. That's safe. Get in the lifeboat, you're dead.
Man tends to put limitations on God.
Yep. Yep. So all those fellows, they owed Paul a great deal because they're saved because of Paul. And evidently Julian understood that. He's going to treat him with even better respect.
And his confidence and his assurity was contagious
Yeah.
to everyone around.
That's right. That's right. All right. We'll stop there.